Reverend Eldon Johnson, who was pastor of Zion Covenant Church for 31 years and has had a very effective ministry along with his wife Rosemary over these years. He has always taken a deep interest in music and been heard often in the community with his Swedish renditions, especially at the Lucia Fest. I love Eldon's singing at the Lucia Fest. And I also enjoy his folksy speeches. We want to thank you, Eldon, for coming today. We always enjoy you.
Thank you. A good public comment.
I think it was some years ago, as a semi-joke, people would say, what is life? And the answer came, well, life is a magazine. Well, I'm coming to you today and saying, what is reminiscence? Can any of you, I'm going to have a little contest here. Is there anybody here who believes that they can spell reminiscences?
Is that really a word?
Yes. Well, as life was a magazine, Reminiscences is also a magazine. How many of you have this magazine? Quite a few. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law gave this to me and Rosemary for Christmas. And now we get it every year, which is fine. I History Channel the other night and realized that I was there in most of these things. So that says something, and I guess I have reached that point in life where I can really be an old person. This magazine is really quite a good magazine, except that I've experienced most of these things that are in here. And it was kind of tough to really get to that point. Nevertheless, I'll do the best I can, because reminiscences is something that's very personal. And so you have reminiscences, and I have reminiscences, but probably some of my reminiscences aren't quite like yours. And so it did get kind of personal as I got into these things. I was born in Rockford, Illinois. That's just about 90 miles sort of northwest of Chicago. And Rockford had a pretty decent Swedish population, especially on the east side of the river. The Italians lived on the other side of the river. And it was quite an experience growing up in a Swedish community. It was also the church, the Swedish Mission Covenant Church, and so there were a lot of Swedish things there. The male chorus was known as a Sångarbröderna, and so they had a lot of good Swedish songs, and I really appreciated hearing the boys sing. Well, growing up, I had some reminiscences. In this page, there are a 1955 Buick. Well, I can beat that. My first car was a 1927 Chrysler. And I named it Fritz, according to the beautiful violinist. And we had a lot of fun with old Fritz. And I think probably my dad got it for me from a guy that worked for him. And I think my dad got it so we could have an extra gas book for gasoline. Now, I remember around our house, we had some great experiences. Thanks. I've been having problems with my voice. Usually it lasts a little longer than this, but I had one embarrassing experience with Fritz. I was going to go out to play golf on a golf course about north of town, and I didn't get a good start on going up the hill. So one of my remembrances was that a tractor passed me. into my dad's family home on 10th Street in Rockford, and there I stayed with my grandmother. She lived upstairs. My grandfather was a character. He was a little guy, and he loved these little toys that you wound up and he jumped around all the time. And he really had a great time with those. And that's what I remember about him. My grandmother, she always wanted to learn English, and I wanted to learn Swedish. So when I talked to her later on in time, excuse me, she would talk Swedish to me, and I would talk English to me, and I would talk Swedish to her, and neither of us could do the language, so we didn't have a lot of conversation. Then we made a drastic move. We moved from 10th Street to 10th Street to 4th Street. So I was going downhill there. But that brought me within 3 houses of my other grandma. And she was a great grandma. She kind of, try something else here. She made fudge for me. And I really appreciated that. She broke her hip, and so we spent a lot of time over there. We put her in the dining room, and I sat in the living room, and they had one of those console radios. And I liked the Lone Ranger. So I would put my ear right into that console, and my grandma was thinking that I wasn't listening to something that I should have been listening to. Lyssna till grunt! Oh, Grandma, it's only the Lone Ranger. He was a good guy. We really had a good time with Grandma's. She made wonderful fudge. And I appreciated that very, very much, because she always let me scrape the pan. And my other little grandfather, he went to a meeting at church. They call it the Sjukmöte, and I couldn't figure out why he was going to a sick meeting. Later on in my life, I went to a lot of sick meetings. But he was a great little guy, and I enjoyed him. Now, the Swedes in Rockford had nicknames, and that was one of my remembrances. Do any of you remember some interesting nicknames? One of the ones that I remember was Spelekolle. He was a guy that played the violin. But some of them were really nasty. A lady that was born without a bridge on her nose, she was known as Näselösa. And I thought that was kind of a cheap shot. Sometimes you need it in Rockford to have different identifications of some of these people. And it was a good experience living in Rockford and being brought up in the First Covenant Church. Around this time, the Depression was there. I didn't notice too much about it. My dad, I couldn't believe that he kept working at a piano factory during the Depression. I would think that that would be one factory that would go down quickly. But he was able to work. And it was a good experience that kept us going. And we enjoyed that very, very much. Rockford had a rather large church in the Swedish. And there were about 800 members in the church there. And they had Bible school. And I became disgusted that the week after school let out, it was Bible school. And my friend Wayne Stark, he didn't have to go to Bible school, but I did. And yet, I appreciated that time, and even though it was very difficult, it was the beginning of my faith and my trust in God. In the old church, they would have evangelistic meetings. And it wasn't unusual that people would come out and ask if you were saved. And I remember sitting down in that space. It's on the left-hand side. And I was sitting there, and a little deacon came up and said, "Are you saved?" And I said, "Yes." And that was the first time I made a real commitment to the Lord by saying yes to Him. And I appreciate the fact that we had this particular opportunity. My dad didn't say too much, but he did love the male chorus. And the male chorus had some great songs. Till med him jag återlängtar, hem till mina fäder jord. That was a beautiful old song. And there were quite a few others. Sköna maj välkommen. And so I had a chance to pick up some of these songs from the old male chorus. And then getting to North Park College, singing in the North Park Choir, Trigare was a beauty. And it was a wonderful song. And had opportunity to sing in a couple of quartets. One in the church, and Pastor Gilbert Swenson, he arranged an itinerary for us. Well, the first stop on our itinerary was in Everett, Washington. And from Rockford, Illinois to Everett, Washington is a long time, and we didn't get any collections in between time for gas. But we did have a great time, and we sang in churches down through. And one of the experiences of doing this enabled me to take that spirit of Christ and get a couple of guys together and have this thing. And we chipped in. We worked until about August. We pooled all of our money together and then foolishly bought a Buick. And we had to get all the way out to Everett. And when we got back, we sold the car, and we got exactly the amount of money that we put into it. And that was an answer to prayer. Well, at North Park, it was the same experience. And being in there, this experience of the Swedish background, the songs, the ideas were always great. And things that I remember especially was the girls had a little string band. And they had costumes. They'd get all duded up in these Swedish costumes. And I don't remember the Swedish songs that they sang, but I do remember one. Oh, deeper yet I pray, and higher every day. And that song has kind of stuck with me for all of these many, many years. And then the remembrances of Christmas. It wasn't just the food, but my grandmother's brother-in-law was laid off for the time during the Depression. And he built about 8 wooden churches and gave them to all of his nieces and nephews. And so my mother got one and I got one. And so for this, every year, we bring out the little church, and that's one of the sacred memories that we have. And now I've given one to my son, and the one that I have will go to my other boy, and hope that that kind of a spirit can continue on as we kind of think about these things. And then as we met together, the Swedish people kind of grouped together. My grandmother rather lived right here, and then her sister lived over here, and 2 blocks down her other sister lived. And so we were together as a family. And so we had the Swedish food for Christmas Eve. We went to Juluta. And these things are precious in your memory. And so we would be together, and these little churches just bring this whole thing into perspective again. And then I got to going to seminary and started bringing my Christian testimony into, well, I started in a one-room school, and I brought my 26 Chrysler out to the school and parked it there. It made a very good impression on people going past. And I had one of my most embarrassing moments. My little pulpit was up on the teacher's desk, and behind me was the clock. And I was preaching away, and all of a sudden, this little girl got up, and she just went. And so that was one of my growing experiences. And then, well, we went going on Sunday mornings, and the Lord opened up new opportunities, and so I ended up at Jamestown, New York. And I have appreciated being here for many, many years, and having the opportunity of sharing some of the old Swedish traditions, the songs. We have had opportunity to go around, as some of you remember, and it was a great experience to share that which God brought into our lives that came through these people that were very special. My grandma's brother, oh, she had 3 brothers. One she left in Sweden. Her one, I guess he decided to stay in Sweden. And another one went to California. And the other one was the pastor of the Covenant Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he became quite a strong man in our Covenant Church. And his 2 sons, they became ministers. And these people would come to visit my grandma, and it was just a pleasure for me to meet them. And one of his sons, Herbert Palmquist, who was a pastor in Chicago for many years, gave me the opportunity to sense his presence in a very special way when I was ordained, when he laid his head upon my head, or his hand upon my head, and I could just sense that kind of a tradition. And now I have turned over being the historian of our family to another young man who just graduated from seminary this year, to keep up the spirit and the love and the joy that's a part of not only a relationship of nationality, but a relationship of God as our Heavenly Father, and then to sing some of these great songs. And so I thought that the best way we could reminisce would be to sing some of these songs. So if you'd like to take your song sheets now. And we'll start with this one that may not be too familiar with you. Oh, let your soul now be filled with gladness. Carl Olson, who was the president of North Park College, must have picked up this song that was probably written around the 1800s. And it's a joyful song. And would you like to stand up for a minute, or is that too much trouble? Or maybe you should stand up when you sing, "Oh, let my soul now be filled with gladness." We're singing verses 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Oh, let my soul now be filled with gladness. Rejoice in thee, O bring of thou and songs. Our life like a Savior, there in Godland, a pilgrim of Jesus and Father's friend.
violins and sing some of these good old songs, on Scullop na Pearly and the Michel open the pearly gates and all those. So it brings back memories to me too. Okay, now we're going to have her praised it to Old Sweden.
You know, before we sing, I would like to say what a thrill it is for me today to be with Jim Beal, Greg Peterson, Brian Bogey, Gladys Peterson, who've all done this. I just can't believe it. And Eldon Johnson, I'm a 1941 confirmand of Zion Covenant Church. And I would like to just give one little reminisce for me, too, in the old days. I went to a farm every weekend of my life where my father grew up. He had 3 sisters that never got married. And, they spoiled me rotten because my grandparents all died before I was born. And Christmas would come and they had the old phone on the wall that you rang like this, and they called the other 4th sister next door and tell them what all they were buying me for Christmas, and it was Swedish and I could never understand it. Okay, so when it's springtime in Old Sweden, come on everybody, get up and really sing with gusto.
Remember